First, we got help from Cuban doctors, and now it seems we'll be getting some help from Cuban engineers. The Department of Water and Sanitation say these engineers have been brought here to help out with government's bulk water infrastructure. But local engineers say there are enough skilled people available here and that local engineers should have been prioritized. To discuss this, we have the Department of Water and Sanitation spokesperson Sputnik Radau, as well as Mdu Mlaba, who is the president of the National Society of Black Engineers. Good evening to you both. I'd like to begin with you, Ndade Radau. Do we not have enough engineers in the country that could be doing this work?
Good evening, Ms. Zwani, and thank you for the opportunity, and good evening to Mr. Mlaba. I think it's important to realize that this is not a question of saying or competing between the two nations. We are not saying that there isn't enough capacity or there isn't sufficient capacity, but part of what we are doing is that we are saying that these people are coming here based on what we have had an agreement on since 2001. And remember that, Bongiwe, if you go back, this is not the first cohort of engineers that has come in. We have had the last ones were here in 2015, and therefore this is a continuation of the government-to-government relations that we have with Cuba that have been going for almost 3 decades now. And these engineers come here to partner with us and not to take jobs. They will be here for a period, and that is why we are saying that for that time, we will then utilize this. This does not take away the fact that we've got very good engineers here that we will be looking at working with going into the future.
Babu Mlaba, I know that your organization is seeing red over this particular development. Are you convinced by this response that you're then getting from the Human Settlements Department to say that we can't begin to compare the two? It is a skills transfer program.
Yeah, Bongiwe, thanks for the opportunity and good evening to Mr. Radau and the listeners. I'm happy that Mr. Radau is now clarifying from the side of DWS that the Cubans are brought to the country not because we don't have skills in the country, but it's because of the bilateral relations that exist between South Africa and Cuba. We all know that these are relationships that go way back during the struggle for freedom. So I'm happy to hear today from Mr. Radau that there is no doubt that in the country we do have qualified people who can be able to deal with the challenges that we're facing in terms of our bulk water infrastructure.
All right, and Ndade, when we look at the reports that then came out, particularly around what the minister had to say, is that there's a lot of need in rural areas, and it doesn't look like the engineers in this country are somewhat prepared, and I'm paraphrasing here, to be faced with these hardships of working in these particular rural areas. This is a statement that has caused an upset among others. Is Action SA leader Herman Mashaba, who was saying this is simply not true. Has the minister done a survey to then substantiate this particular statement to say that some of our engineers are not prepared for this kind of work?
Bongiwe, what we see and what we know is that you have in your rural and smaller municipalities, obviously municipalities that are not able to attract the kind of revenue and income that is able to sustain some of the skills that are required. And you know that the skills that we are talking about are highly desirable, highly in demand, and we will always compete as government with private sector and with opportunities even outside of this country. And the fact of the matter is that we do have, you find those young engineers that come in at the very early stages of their careers. They work in those municipalities, especially their own municipalities. I remember a case in point in the Northern Cape where we had such an experience. But the municipality could not retain those skills because opportunities of better remuneration, better conditions, and all of that always come to the fore. It is not the fault of the engineer to be attracted elsewhere. But it is a reality that if we look at some of those municipalities that are really struggling, even some of the metros would also struggle to retain some of those skills. So it's a question of how many can we be able to attract, but beyond attracting those skills, retain them. Simply because the conditions would not necessarily give themselves, to sustainable employment in that area, because there are better options elsewhere.
Babu Mlaba, if I can read a quote from the minister here saying very few of our engineers would possibly opt to go work in the rural areas because they have families, they have preferences of where to work. Is the statement true in your assessment, particularly looking at your organization, the Society of Black Engineers?
Yeah, I just want to put it on record that our engineers are willing to work anywhere in the country where they're required to provide their services. So if you look at civil engineers, for example, that's a discipline of engineering that's very relevant for DWS. Civil engineers, by their very nature, they work in remote areas and rural areas. So for us, I think it's a question of making sure that those engineers are provided an environment where they can be able to be remunerated appropriately as per the EXA guidelines, and they can also have a working environment that will be conducive for them to want to be part of. So we wrote a paper and submitted it to COCTA. At the time, COCTA was led by, I think it was Dr. Zwelim Kiza at the time. Yes, it was. And we made a proposal on what can be done by the municipalities to attract the right caliber of engineers and actually retain them. So we have written to the Minister of DWS, and we have requested a meeting so that we can share some of the ideas that can help the municipalities to attract and retain the right caliber of engineers.
And when you then look at this decision then to have these Cuban engineers come to South Africa to then assist us with some of our water issues, I know that you say that you're happy that, the department has moved to clarify some, its position in some of these issues, but do you welcome them? Do you welcome these Cuban engineers who are coming here to South Africa on this skills exchange program as it has been put by the department?
I think as long as it's well articulated and well documented to say that these are the expectations of what they need to deliver for the period that they'll be in the country, and these are the KPIs against which they'll be measured. So if, for example, we say that they're in the country to transfer skills to the young engineers, we'll then say those young engineers that they're going to be transferring skills to, once they are done in terms of their stay in the country, I believe they're in the country for a period of 3 years. So after 3 years, we need to then evaluate if those engineers will then be ready to register with EXA as professional engineers. And then we'll then measure how many of those engineers that they've trained are able to register with EXA as professional engineers. So for us, that will be a true measure to see whether their presence in the country is adding value or not. But in principle, I just want to put it on record that we do not have any issues against Cubans. It's just that we need to be clear that when they are brought to the country, we must not create an impression that there are no skills in the country or create an impression that they are possibly better engineers than us. Because if you look at South African engineers, we are recognized internationally, and our standing internationally is very important that we protect it, because some of our engineers work overseas, and it's important that we protect the profession in the country.
And Dr. Radau, I'd like us to listen to Action SA leader Herman Mashaba, who's been saying that, it appears as if government is putting Cubans before South Africans, but then he continues to talk about, just how unhappy he is when it comes to this particular move by the Water and Sanitation Department. I'd like you to listen to some of what he had to say during an interview here on Newsroom Africa a little earlier on. And if you can please just give us your reaction immediately, after this particular, soundbite and view by Action SA leader Herman Mashaba.
And you know who's appointed 2 years ago to fix and maintain the Rooiwal water treatment plant? A company called Blackhead Consulting, owned by this Mr. Sodi, who's currently on bail because of the asbestos fiasco in the Free State. So I think one of the reasons why perhaps the minister is bringing the Cubans to come and assist Mr. Sodi, 295 million rands. And we had public consultations 2 weeks ago over 3 days. Experts who came into being, including one of the senior officials who subsequently left the office, called Mr. X. Unfortunately, was not ready to prepare to come open on camera, but we've got his recordings that Mr. Sodi's company was 50 million rands more expensive, with low experience of knowing exactly what they're doing. Perhaps the minister wants to come and obviously salvage this. But I find it really very difficult why the city of Tshwane, run by the DA, is actually also defending this particular matter, because they are aware that Mr. Sodi's Blackhead Consulting has got absolutely no knowledge whatsoever in water sanitation.
Now, Ndateratau, if you can react to that for us in about 40 seconds, we're almost out of time.
I think I'll take even less than 40. In the first instance, 2 years ago, we were working with the SANDF, and they gave over to ERVAT. And when ERVAT was there, ERVAT is a company that belongs to the city of Ekurhuleni. I don't know about a Mr. Sodi company that was running, that has ever been around the VAL. That's the first thing. I think the second thing is that with the issue of Hammanskraal, we were there with the minister about 2 weeks ago, with the city of Tshwane, because of the issues of Rooiwal, where we have seen the kind of progress that has been made. So far, we are not yet at a state of Uhuru, but there is a difference between the last time we were there, when the portfolio committee was there 2 years in 2019 and 2020 for their oversight, and where things are now.
All right, I'd like to thank you both for your time tonight. That's Sanitation Department, in fact, Water and Sanitation Department spokesperson Sputnik Ratau, and Mdu Mlaba, who's the president of the National Society of Black Engineers. Thank you so much to you both.